We have long believed that unilateral sanctions don't accurately achieve the purpose they were intended to achieve. And toward that, we became re-engaged in a conversation with Cuba when we heard that there were several economic reforms that were underway. And Mr. Donahue and I, again, Mr. Donahue came back to visit Cuba in May of 2014. He and I have had 3 subsequent meetings with the President of Cuba. We've met with the minister. We received greater clarity on the methodic economic reforms that were underway, about the 600,000 people who had been taken off the government payroll and were now operating these contractistas engaged in free enterprise. We believe that there was reason that the U.S. business community could be involved in a changing Cuba and in a changing policy shift toward Cuba. So since the President made his announcement on December 17th and our governments have reestablished diplomatic relations, we've also had the opportunity to have some new engagements because of the regulations that have changed, been helpful to us. And we established our U.S.-Cuba Business Council. Our chairman, Carlos Gutierrez, the former Secretary of the Department of Commerce and CEO of the Kellogg Corporation, just welcomed the minister and his team. We had a private regulatory dialogue, stakeholder session, preceding the government-to-government dialogue tomorrow. And we are honored that we have the opportunity to have this historic moment in time, to have one of the highest-ranking Cuban officials ever to visit the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, let alone a minister to visit us at this level for half a century. With that, I wanted to welcome the minister here and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jody. Well, as I said, I'm going to read this declaration in Spanish. Translator is going to also read it in English. And after all, I will answer some questions. En primer lugar, deseo reconocer a la Cámara de Comercio de los Estados Unidos, en especial a su presidente Tom Donahue, y a los directivos que lo acompañan en la conducción de esta importante institución, el interés y los esfuerzos que realizan por contribuir al avance en el camino hacia la normalización de las relaciones bilaterales entre Cuba y los Estados Unidos y por acogernos en su sede para efectuar las actividades que ha desarrollado nuestra delegación en Cuba.
First of all, I would like to thank the Chamber of Commerce of the United States, especially its President, Tom Donahue, and the members of the board that accompanied him in the leading of this important institution, and the interests and efforts that have been conducted to contribute to the advancement and the change towards the normalization of the relations between the two countries, Cuba and the United States, and for hosting us in the venues of this institution to hold these activities that have been developed with our delegation today.
La decisión de los presidentes de Cuba y de los Estados Unidos de América de restablecer las relaciones diplomáticas bilaterales, anunciada el 17 de diciembre de 2014, marcó el inicio de un camino complejo y con numerosos desafíos. El principal de ellos es el bloqueo económico, comercial y financiero vigente durante más de 50 años, que constituye el mayor obstáculo para que los sectores de negocio de los dos países puedan construir vínculos en beneficio de nuestro pueblo. En el día de mañana se efectuará la segunda ronda de intercambios entre funcionarios cubanos y autoridades de las agencias del gobierno de los Estados Unidos responsables de la implementación de las regulaciones que rigen las relaciones de carácter comercial, económico y financiero con Cuba. Esta reunión dará continuidad al diálogo iniciado en La Habana en octubre del pasado año.
The decision by the President of Cuba and the United States of reestablishing the diplomatic relations between the two countries, announced on December the 17th, 2014, earmarked the beginning of a new path which is very complex and imposes numerous challenges. The main challenge, suppose, is the economic, commercial, and financial blockade that has been in place for over 50 years, which constitutes the most important obstacle for the business sectors of both countries to continue to establish links that benefit both peoples. Tomorrow, the second round of exchanges of officials, both from the Cuban and the American side, in the areas of authorities for the regulatory framework is going to be held, especially in the area of trade and economic and financial character. This meeting will provide continuity to the dialogues that started in Havana on October last year.
Apreciamos la conducción por parte de la Secretaria de Comercio, la señora Penny Pritzker, de este ejercicio necesario para lograr la comprensión del alcance de las restricciones que aún se mantienen. Ciertamente, el presidente Barack Obama ha aprobado la emisión de varios paquetes de medidas que modifican algunos aspectos del bloqueo. Estas medidas constituyen pasos positivos y en la dirección correcta, pero aún resultan insuficientes, pues no resuelven temas de gran trascendencia cuya solución está al alcance de sus facultades ejecutivas. Por solo mencionar algunos ejemplos, me referiré a la prohibición del uso del dólar estadounidense en las transacciones internacionales de Cuba. Esta es una de las restricciones que más negativamente incide y tiene un impacto extraterritorial relevante. Y su modificación emitiría una señal clara al sector de negocios y en particular a la banca.
We would like to show our appreciation for the conduction by Secretary Pritzker of this exercise, which is so necessary to actually arrive to an understanding of the outreach of the restrictions that are still in place. Certainly, President Obama approved the issuance of various packages of measures that modify some aspects of the blockade. These measures constitute positive steps and are in the right direction, but still they are insufficient, since they do not resolve issues of great transcendence, which solution is at the reach of the executive faculties. Just to mention a few, I will refer to the prohibition of using the US dollar in international transactions with Cuba. This is one of the restrictions that has more negative impact and is extraterritorial and relevant for that matter. Its modification would send a clear signal to the business sector, especially to the banking system.
Y otros dos ejemplos son la prohibición a las compañías estadounidenses de importar los principales bienes y servicios cubanos, por ejemplo el ron, el tabaco, los productos de la biotecnología, minerales, servicios médicos, entre otros, cuya eliminación resulta necesaria para que se produzca un verdadero intercambio comercial en ambas direcciones. Y el tercer ejemplo es la restricción a las empresas estadounidenses de invertir en Cuba. En medio de las dificultades impuestas por el bloqueo, mi país avanza en la actualización del modelo económico que los cubanos hemos adoptado para preservar y extender el alcance de nuestras conquistas sociales y lograr el socialismo próspero y sostenible al capital.
The second area would be the banning of the U.S. companies from importing the main goods and services exported by Cuba. We are talking about rum, cigars, and biotechnological products, minerals, medical services, among others. The elimination of such ban would result in something necessary for a real exchange in the commercial areas between the two countries and in both directions. The third one would be the restriction to U.S. companies that ban them from investing in Cuba. In the midst of all these difficulties imposed by the blockade, my country advances in the updating of its economic model, which we Cubans have adopted to preserve and extend the outreach of the social conquest and achieve a prosperous, sustainable socialism which we all aspire to.
Este proceso se ha desarrollado sobre la base de la decisión soberana del gobierno cubano y con el respaldo de la gran mayoría de nuestra sociedad, cuyos criterios fueron tomados en cuenta en amplias consultas populares que no dejan duda de la legitimidad de las decisiones que se han adoptado. Entre otros propósitos, el proceso de actualización del modelo incluye el fortalecimiento del sistema empresarial cubano y la consolidación de la participación de diversas formas de gestión en la vida económica del país, incluidas actividades desarrolladas por el sector no estatal. Además, aunque Cuba ha ampliado sus vínculos económicos con el resto del mundo y mantiene relaciones comerciales con más de 75 países, hemos definido como política que debemos continuar diversificando nuestros socios y estamos trabajando de manera permanente en ese sentido.
The process has been developed on the basis of the sovereign decision of the Cuban government and with the support of the great majority of our society, which opinions were taken into consideration in broad popular consultations, which left no doubt of the legitimacy of the decisions that have been made. Among these purposes, the process of updating of the model include the strengthening of the Cuban entrepreneurial system and the consolidation and participation of diverse management ways on the trade life of the country, including the activities developed by the non-state sector. Also, even though Cuba has broadened its connections in the economic field with the rest of the world and maintains trade relations with over 75 different countries, we have defined as a policy that we must continue to diversify our partners, and we are working permanently in this regard.
La nueva ley de la inversión extranjera, emitida hace casi 2 años, ofrece garantías e incentivos al capital foráneo que pretendemos sea una fuente de desarrollo económico y contribuya a alcanzar las metas de crecimiento económico que nos hemos propuesto. Con este objetivo, hemos priorizado 12 sectores e identificado más de 300 proyectos que se encuentran listos para la participación de inversionistas extranjeros. La creación de la Zona Especial de Desarrollo Mariel introduce atractivos adicionales para invertir en Cuba. Pensamos que el sector de negocio de los Estados Unidos debería poder ejercer su derecho a participar de esas oportunidades de igual modo que lo hacen los empresarios del resto del mundo. No es Cuba quien los discrimina, sino las propias leyes estadounidenses.
The new Foreign Investment Act, issued about 2 years ago, offers guarantees and incentive to foreign capital, which we intend to be a source of economic development and contribute to reach the goals of growth in the economic field that we have attained our aim. With this purpose, we have prioritized 12 sectors and identified 300 different projects, which are ready for the participation of foreign investors. The establishment of the Special Development Zone of Mariel introduces new attractions to invest in Cuba. We believe that the business sectors of the United States should exercise the right to participate in these opportunities as is done by the entrepreneurs from the rest of the world. It is not Cuba the one that discriminates against. It is the very American laws that do it.
La presencia de esta delegación cubana en Washington, D.C. es una expresión de la voluntad política del gobierno de Cuba de lograr avances sustanciales hacia la normalización de nuestras relaciones bilaterales. Somos además portadores de un saludo amistoso al pueblo de los Estados Unidos y en particular a su comunidad empresarial. Durante esta visita además de participar en el segundo diálogo regulatorio y los contactos que hemos tenido en el día de hoy, sostendremos otros con varios representantes del sector empresarial. Y tenemos previsto reunirnos con autoridades del gobierno de los Estados Unidos con el objetivo de continuar intercambiando sobre los próximos pasos que debemos dar en este proceso hacia la normalización de las relaciones bilaterales.
The presence of this Cuban delegation in Washington, D.C. is an expression of the political will of the Cuban government to provide progress, substantial progress, towards the normalization of the relations between the two countries. We are also bearers of the greetings from the Cuban people to the people of the United States, especially to its business community. During this visit, we also participate in the second regulatory dialogue and the contacts that we have had so far in the day of today. We will hold with representatives of the business sector, having also planned other meetings with the authorities of the U.S. government, with the purpose of continuing in the exchange on the basis and taking into consideration the steps that must be taken towards the normalization of bilateral relations.
Lamentablemente no pudimos complementar una de las actividades que teníamos previstas, la invitación que nos hizo el gobernador del estado de Virginia, señor Terry McAuliffe, como teníamos previsto, pero el tiempo, las condiciones climatológicas que prevalecieron el día de ayer nos impidieron viajar como teníamos previsto, a Virginia. Pero estamos en contacto con el gobernador y esperamos tener un encuentro con él próximamente.
Unfortunately, we could not fulfill the invitation that was extended to us by the governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, because which we expected to do during this week, due to the weather conditions that prevailed yesterday. But we are in contact with him, and we expect to have this opportunity soon. I am willing to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll have 30 minutes for questions. So we'll go until about 2:41. And do we need a mic?
Do you need a mic?
You need a mic? I don't know.
Yes, maybe that's him. Or,
Since we have English translation, I would like to ask you in Spanish if possible, and I am not going to rise up because of the cameras.
okay.
Mi nombre es Gustavo Alegre. Ministro, gracias por atendernos. Tengo una pregunta para pedirle una valoración de las conversaciones que se han producido hoy en La Habana del restablecimiento del acuerdo de aviación civil y por otro lado la valoración de lo que espera de esta segunda ronda de conversaciones con el Departamento de Comercio y del Tesoro. Muchas gracias.
Okay, as in regards to the dialogues that have been taking place right now, you have an understanding of the MIU, OU on the in transportation issues?
Yeah. Second round of regulatory
In the
conversations.
second round
Is
of
that
regulatory
what you
conversations.
translated about? Okay, great. So first on the aviation agreement that was signed, and the second was on the second regulatory dialogue, which is to occur tomorrow, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Good.
Okay, since the question was in Spanish, we'll take advantage of that. No, nosotros tenemos una
Sí.
alta valoración del acuerdo que se firma hoy en La Habana con la presencia del secretario de Transporte de los Estados Unidos, un acuerdo que va a normalizar el flujo de intercambio de visitas entre los dos países. Yo mismo para llegar aquí con mi delegación tuvimos que viajar 8 horas, porque tuvimos que ir a Panamá, que es atrasarnos, después viajar hasta aquí, simplemente porque no había vuelos regulares en los dos países. Hay vuelos charters, pero esos vuelos tienen determinadas restricciones. Así que estoy seguro que esto va a ayudar mucho a una mejor comunicación entre los dos países, lo vamos como un paso muy positivo. Y en relación con, bueno, ¿quieres traducir?
So we highly value the signing of the MOU on the area of the regular flights between Cuba and the United States. this is something that we really see very positively, and we have to say ourselves, in order to get to these meetings in Washington DC, we have to take about 8 hours, since we didn't have direct flights. There are some charter ones, but has some restrictions in place.
En cuanto al diálogo regulatorio, esta segunda ronda que vamos a sostener, vamos a inaugurar mañana, pero va a continuar el jueves. Estamos seguros que va a contribuir a una mejor comprensión entre ambas partes de las regulaciones vigentes en cada lado y cómo podemos trabajar de conjunto para hacer realidad, concretar algunas de las operaciones que se pueden hacer en el comercio bilateral.
In terms of the regulatory dialogue, which is going to start tomorrow and is going to continue on Thursday, we believe that it's a very good opportunity in terms of sitting down and discussing the current regulations, how they are implemented, and what can be done in order to better use what currently exists and what can be advanced.
Debo añadir solamente que la primera ronda de diálogo, cuando la secretaria Pritzker visitó La Habana en octubre pasado, nos sirvió sobre todo para conocer mejor, ambas partes conocernos mejor. Ella misma declaró a la prensa que había ido a Cuba a aprender. Nosotros venimos con la misma humildad para seguir trabajando de manera conjunta y promover el desarrollo de estas relaciones económicas y comerciales entre los dos países.
I would like to say that during the first regulatory dialogue, it was an opportunity to actually learn from each other. As the Secretary of Commerce said herself, it was an opportunity to learn. She wanted Havana to learn, and we have come to the United States and humbly to also learn from each other and taking up this opportunity to further advance that.
Let me just comment, today is a historic day, but many days over the past 14 months have been historic in this relationship. You have a minister visiting in Washington, and you have a Secretary of Transportation down signing a deal in Havana. This is the linchpin of travel and trade. Today is a very historic day, and we are ecstatic that this aviation agreement was signed, and that our membership interest to keep working on a commercial relationship together will be advanced through a regulatory dialogue meeting again tomorrow. Thank you, Chris.
Mr. Minister Serena Marshall with ABC News. Just yesterday, OFAC, a small business owner announced that they received an OFAC license from the Treasury Department to build what would be the first U.S. factory in Havana at Mariel Point. Just wondering if the Cuban government plans to move this forward quickly, if so, on what timeline, and the businesses said they plan to start building these tractors by the end of this year, just 2 years after that announcement to restore diplomatic ties. So just wondering if you can comment on if you plan to move this forward, and if so, how quickly.
It's obviously a very interesting possibility that an American company can work in Cuba and install a factory, in this case in the special development zone of Mariel, to produce, in this case, tractors that could be used in our agriculture, of course, to be available for the different forms of production, the cooperatives, the farmers, all the producers in the land side. The fact that this has now an authorization, a license from the Treasury Department, allows this enterprise to start the negotiations with the Cuban enterprises. So what I can say is that they are welcome. They will be treated as any other company around the world interested in this kind of business. I consider myself personally that this is an interesting venture because of what I just said, that it's a kind of product that we can use very well in our fields to produce. So I wish him luck, but it is not enough to have permission from the American side. He needs to negotiate with the counterpart, the entrepreneurial counterpart in Cuba, to have a real business in hands. But I believe it's a good news, and I hope it's not going to be a single decision. It is going to be accompanied by other decisions in the same sense. There are many companies that I know, American companies that have visited Cuba, and they are expecting licenses from the Treasury Department in order to make happen their own businesses.
But kind of, do you think that they'll be able to move forward on production by the end of this year? Would the negotiations on the Cuban side move quickly?
I hope so, why not? But I can assure you that it will depend, especially in the negotiation with the Cuban company, because he is supposed to make a kind of joint venture with the Cuban company, and that is something you need to negotiate. But being optimistic, I believe it's possible, of course.
Hi, thanks. Julie Davis with the New York Times. You said now a couple of times that you personally have heard from American businesses that want to invest in Cuba but are waiting for action by the United States government. Either they're experiencing delays or they just haven't had a decision yet from the Treasury Department or the Commerce Department. I wondered, can you give us some specific examples, and then can you also talk about, and this is a sort of follow-up to the previous question, what the posture is of the Cuban government in terms of approving these ventures once they have been allowed by the U.S. government. Some companies, some American companies have said publicly that they are experiencing delays or a lack of action on the Cuban side, the cruise lines among them. So could you comment on whether you are planning to, be more, be a little more speedy with your own approvals on the Cuban government side, or make any changes on your own side to make sure that these ventures can go forward?
On the Cuban side, we are willing to receive all the American companies to make business. There is no problem. The biggest problem is the blockade. The blockade doesn't allow the American companies to come freely to Cuba to make business. That's the problem. I know companies which are in contact with Cuban companies trying to make shorter the period of negotiation, and they have almost reached agreements with the Cuban counterparts. Maybe it's not the case of this company, tractors producers, but I don't want to put examples because I don't know if they want to the public to know what they are doing, but they have advanced with the Cuban side almost to sign the agreement. But they say, don't worry, maybe in March we are going to have the license. That's what I mean. It's a big obstacle that you have to reach a permission to come to Havana and start discussions. That's what I mean. In our side, we are going to treat the American companies the same we treat all the others from all over the place, the places in the world. We are not going to discriminate the American companies. We are not going to make the processes more complicated or whatever. We want, I explained today during lunch and before in the other meetings, that we need the foreign investment to come to Cuba. It's an important component to promote the economic development of Cuba. So we are not creating barriers. We want them to come. We are promoting this. So it would be stupid on our side to delay things. Or no, we don't want to do that. Of course, as I already said, you need to have an agreement. That's normal in any business. If there are two parts, you need to combine them and reach an agreement before the business is completely implemented. But on our side, we are willing to work together with the American companies, and I hope, as I said before, that many of them are going to receive licenses, or maybe better than that, that one day the blockade is going to be lifted and they could come freely to Cuba to do business.
I think from our perspective at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is while there's been an ebb and tide of trade flow with Cuba, the new economic regime has provided opportunities for our foreign competitors to sign deals. So this gentleman's been out there flying around the world, doing his job, and European companies are signing deals. Other countries and their companies are signing deals. We don't know whether or not we can get a license to fly down to negotiate. We don't know if we'll have approval for a license to get a license. Everyone in the government so far are doing the best they can with a set of sanctions regimes that make for a very complicated regulatory environment that are holding us up, American companies, from being able to sign the same way that we see our global competitors signing right now.
My name is Sergio Gomez from Drama newspaper. My question is for Ms. Bond. What do you think, what's your opinion? What else could the business community in the United States do to push both the government and the Congress to put an end to the blockade that, as we see, is the main issue here for go further in the relation between the two countries?
I think that one of the things that I said when we were on the stage, the more you talk and you engage with your counterparts around the globe, and in this particular case, Cuba, its government, its citizens, I recognize how little the American public has understood, and particularly America's lawmakers have understood, about the shifting reality that's been taking place for some time in Cuba. It's almost as if it's taken us too long to get the memo. So we started up this U.S.-Cuba Business Council to take our companies to Cuba, to encourage people-to-people exchanges. Ultimately, I think the Congress needs to be educated better about what predominantly the American public, the American farmer, the American telecommunications company, the American innovation company, what they want is an end to these sanctions. They want a fully normalized relationship with Cuba. And until we can take the time to educate those lawmakers about how important that is, I think we're going to continue to see our foreign competitors accessing the market while we're not.
Hi, Will Walden with the Wall Street Journal. I just wanted to ask, what do you think is the most important factor that would bring U.S.-Cuba business ties closer? Would it be continued reforms and policies in Havana that would help bring that about? Would it be shifting politics in Congress that would bring about the end to the legislative embargo, or would it be the election of a new president who's willing to continue to bring about closer relations with Cuba, rather than a president in the U.S. who might go the other direction? Thank you.
In my personal opinion, the biggest obstacle, and I already said that, is the American economic, commercial, and financial embargo. We call it blockade, we call it embargo, to Cuba. When this is finished, I believe the relationship would be more normal. The companies will be more in contact in a better manner, and this is going to help a lot to. We could speculate what is going to happen in November, if it's a Democrat president or if it's a Republican president. In my opinion also, I believe that in any case, this road we have started to walk in both sides is the right one. We could not live so close to each other geographically and so far apart in other in other subjects. I believe that it's very important that this road is going to, we are going to continue moving on this road, on this track, and in the future, no matter if the president is from one party or the other, it's a need to normalize the relations between Cuba and the U.S. And what we are going to do in our side is work for that, no matter what. We are going to maintain our disposition to have a normal relationship with the U.S.
Hi, Doug Palmer with Politico. I noticed that last year, U.S. exports to Cuba actually fell, even though President Obama took steps to liberalize trade, and agricultural exports in particular had fallen. I just wondered, is that a deliberate strategy on the part of Cuba to increase pressure in Congress to completely lift the embargo? How would you explain the fact that exports to Cuba are actually declining in this period where
It has an easy explanation.
We agree.
The thing is that this trading between Cuba and the U.S. that is only for food products. It was approved many years ago through a law that establishes very complex conditions for Cuba to make these inputs. We have to pay in cash in advance, and we cannot transport these goods because our boats are not allowed to touch American ports. So when somebody comes from other country and offers you a credit, 720 days to pay, and comparable prices and comparable quality on the product, then it's very difficult to resist the temptation to move to the other market. And that is what has been happening. And this is what we have explained to many of our friends from American companies who used to sell food products to Cuba. And I said, you need to try to change this. If the situation is the same, it's very difficult for us to maintain, and less possible is to increase the imports in the American market. I put you an example. Last year, one of the products we continue buying in the U.S. because the price is very good. I'm not sure why, but I have my own explanation. Well, this is not something interesting. But the chicken meat it is something that is very competitive. And we last year had some trouble because there was aviar fever in some states in the U.S. and it was complicated to import. So our own authorities, the sanitary authorities in Cuba, forbidden the Cuban company who makes this business to import chicken from the U.S. And immediately appeared several other companies offering chicken and even decreasing the price in order for us. The others want to use the problems you have with the conditions that are applying according to the law you approved originally, in order to make us to leave the market. This year, I believe that in certain states the situation is solved, so we are again buying chicken in the U.S. But what I put this in sample because whatever happens, there are others very willing to offer the products to us in better conditions, I have to say that.
I have one more question.
Thank you. I'm Luis Alonso, AAP. Thank you very much. Minister, I wanted to ask you about the goal Cuba has per year for foreign direct investment. I know you mentioned that in the presentation, but I confused the 2 billion goal with the portfolio that was 8 billion. What's the total amount for this year and for next year? And you said that you want to diversify, you want to depend on one country. What is the target for U.S. Foreign direct investment in, whenever there is the possibility to do that? What would be the ideal percentage of U.S. investment in Cuba?
Well,
Thank you.
I tried to answer. These are 3 questions in one.
I did
But,
that.
no, it's okay, it's okay. Well, when we talk about $2 billion a year, it's because we made a simple calculation. We said, in order to have a growth in the GDP bigger than 5%, we need to invest around 20%. We need to have an accumulation rate of 20%. And the internal savings are not enough. What we have is 12%, 13%, even with the foreign investment we receive today, we don't reach 15%. So, making some numbers, we said, if we receive $2 billion a year in foreign investment, we will have the 20% of accumulation rate, and then we could grow. Grew is the past. I didn't apologize for my English.
This was
I
excellent.
should have
Thank
said
you.
that in the beginning. But well, no, I made these mistakes. But well, if we grow at a at a better rate than 5, for instance, then we need that kind of investment. So that is the number of $2 billion is the result of make these calculations. Now, the real thing is that we ask the Cuban enterprises to produce projects in order to conform this portfolio of foreign investment ventures. And we told them, bring me whatever you have that is according to the policies and that is already studied. Don't come to me with, I want to make a plan to produce glasses, but you don't know anything about glasses or whatever. No, you come here at least with a pre-feasibility study of the project. And you with some data, this is going to cost $40 million, this is going to be I don't know where, and this is something that we are going to recover in 5 years. You come with something. So if you have this project study, then I include it into the portfolio. So when we make the arithmetical addition of all the projects we received, it was a little bit more than 8 billion. Doesn't mean that we are going to have everything done in 1 year. No, maybe in 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, I don't know. It would depend. There are projects that are very attractive and you just publish it and then come a lot of people interested in. There are others that are not that attractive. But the difference between the numbers is that one thing, the 2 billion is for 1 year, 8 billion is the total of the portfolio, and then the third question is that how much of this should be assigned to the US? I don't know. Maybe all of it, maybe nothing. It would depend on the American enterprises in the possibilities they have to reach the Cuban companies, to reach agreements with them, and to make good offers. As I say, and you remember quite well what I said, we are not looking for a pattern of dependence of one or other market. We don't want to come back to the dependency of the US market, but we can't, or we don't want either to have it with Russia, or with China, or with France, or with Spain. No, we want to have a diversified economic relationship. How much for everyone, it would depend on the business, on the quality of the business, you know. The competition, the other thing I can say is that some other entrepreneurs around the world are a little bit concerned about the perspective that the American companies are coming. So they say maybe, oh no, to compete with the Americans is going to be complicated. I don't know. It would depend. It would depend.
But what I'm trying to
I tell to everybody the same thing. You are welcome. Come.
no, but what I'm trying to
Louise, I'm
raise-
sorry, we have to, the minister's been very good with this time, he has to get going, so that's all the time we have for today. If